I believe we have a victims hotline.
We do.
And the PIOs will give you the victims hotline number where they can call to check and just make sure.
And were they transported? Were they all transported to one place?
They went to multiple hospitals.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
So real quick, that hotline
we have been listening to an oftentimes emotional press conference being given out in Thousand Oaks, California, by the Ventura County Sheriff Jeff Dean. He was choking up there at the end when he was talking about Sheriff's Sergeant Ron Helis, who was killed when he responded to a shooting that happened at 11:20 Pacific time at the Borderline Bar and Grill in Thousand Oaks. It was college night. It was country night. There were hundreds of people there. There are various reports from eyewitnesses about exactly describing the shooter, but we just heard from the sheriff that apparently he came in 11:20, started shooting with a handgun. At least a dozen people are dead.
11 people, they said when they walked into the bar, the sheriff did. 11 people were already dead inside the Borderline Bar and Grill. The shooter, he said, was dead. They're not sure if he took his own life or what happened. They don't know anything about him, the sheriff said. And there was a deputy that one witness I heard say he helped the deputy, he helped pull the deputy out of the bar, dragging him into a car so that he could go to the hospital and get help. And that deputy ended up passing away at the hospital.
Right, that was Sheriff Jeff Dean. He says he's been in this business 41 years. He'd never seen anything quite like this. He says he is not ruling out terrorism, but he has no idea if this is terrorism related. The Daily Mail and other outlets are pointing out that the shooter, according to eyewitnesses, seems to have been wearing a trench coat. He had a beard and he had glasses. I also saw an eyewitness, and Angel, you saw this too this morning. He said she came out and said, I knew what to do right away because my dad's in the military. I noticed that he seemed very experienced. He had the right stance and he reloaded right away. So we don't know what type of gun. He said the only thing that the sheriff would bring up is that it seemed to be the only thing they saw is a handgun.
Right.
There is a report that he took his own life.
But so much is not known right now. Jonathan Hunt has been covering this for the last several hours. He joins us right now with breaking details. Jonathan, the early reports were this guy, according to eyewitnesses, there may have been smoke bombs when he entered the restaurant, but it sounded as if the sheriff did not know if that was true or not.
Yeah, Sheriff Dean not confirming that, but multiple eyewitnesses have said that they thought there was some kind of smoke bomb let off immediately before the shooting began. Now, remember, they are in a chaotic scene. They're in a very loud bar. Often what we hear from witnesses in these instances as they first emerge with that mixture of adrenaline and terror is not entirely accurate. So we'll wait for the sheriffs to give us the final word on whether that was indeed the case. If it was, as the sheriff himself said, it would speak to a certain premeditation in this attack. But what we learned as the headline in that press conference was that the 911 call started coming in at 11:20 local time. That's 2:20 a.m. on the East Coast. Within 3 minutes, a sheriff sergeant and an officer with the California Highway Patrol were on scene. The sheriff sergeant, Ron Helis, and the highway patrol officer approached the front of the Borderline Bar and Grill. The sheriff sergeant was the first through that door. He was met by multiple shots, and as we now know from Sheriff Dean, Sheriff Sergeant Hillis died from those injuries. And then as other officers moved in, they found the horrific scene, 11 more victims inside the Borderline Bar and Grill, and they also found what they described as the shooter himself dead. Sheriff saying not clear whether the shooter killed himself or whether he may have been hit by a bullet from one of the law enforcement officers. It appears more likely, given the timeline, that he killed himself, but we do not have that officially yet. The sheriff describing a quite horrific scene inside the Borderline Bar and Grill. He said there is blood everywhere. where the shooter's body is still inside. Obviously, the bodies of the victims are still inside. Another 10 to 15 people, the sheriff estimated, were wounded in this attack and have been taken to local hospitals. But it's obviously very early now in the investigation. The sheriff talked about looking at terrorism as a motive. He said, we do that obviously these days, given the state of the country, given the state of the world. It is something we look at, but he said we have no indication at this point that there was any terrorist motive. But of course, all of this will change over the next few hours as they dig deeper and deeper into what has been a horrific few hours here in Thousand Oaks, about 40 miles north and west of downtown Los Angeles. The Borderline Bar and Grill had a couple of hundred, we believe, largely young people in it last night. It's college night on Wednesdays. There are at least three fairly large universities in this area: California Lutheran, Pepperdine, and Azusa Pacific. And students from all of those, as we understand it, were attending. I spoke to some of them as they came out. They were all horribly shocked, as you can imagine. We spoke to one U.S. Army vet. He was the one who said that the sheriff's deputy was shot right in front of him. He then helped carry that sheriff's deputy to a police car. I asked him, given his experience in the Army, what he thought of the condition of that officer. He said he was unresponsive, and we now know that tragic news directly from Sheriff Dean himself, that sheriff sergeant first through the door because he heard shooting. He knew there was an active shooter there. He went through that door. He paid with his life. Back to you guys.
Jonathan, just to describe the area, when the sun comes up, this is a very nice area, right? And a lot of the Pepperdines and those students who live on the coast, you can cut right through the Malibu woods and get up there. So it's very accessible, correct?
Yeah, Brian, I'm sorry, our IFP's dropping in and out. I think you're asking for a description of the area. This is, Thousand Oaks is a very nice middle-class suburb, 40 miles, as I say, north and west of L.A. It's right, the bar itself, right off the 101 freeway, which is one of the major freeways, runs north along the coast, if you like, from Los Angeles in this area. We're in the heart of the area known as the Valley. And as I say, a lot of colleges around here, and this very much a college bar. And in fact, Wednesday nights are described as college nights by the Borderline Bar and Grill. So largely young people. The sheriff himself confirming as well that the average age he believed was between something like 21 and 26. So it is likely, as we learn the identities of those 11 victims, the actual patrons of the bar, that they will, in the majority at least, turn out to be very, very young people. On top of that, again, let's not forget the sheriff's sergeant, the first through the door, shot multiple times by the shooter, a veteran of the sheriff's department for several decades. I believe the sheriff said 29 years he had been on the job here. And you heard Sheriff Dean himself very, very emotional, saying he used to go to the gym with that sheriff's sergeant. He was a stand-up guy, a great guy, thoroughly committed to the job, and certainly at 11:20 local time last night, he showed that commitment as he heard shooting still going on when he arrived, went through the front door, and was met with multiple bullets that eventually cost him his life.
Yes, survived by his wife and a child, was very close to retirement and good friends with the sheriff. Thank you so much, Jonathan. We'll continue to check back in with you throughout the morning. Let's bring in Mitchell Hunter. He's 19 years old, of Simi Valley. Apparently was in the bar, and we'll find out when we talk to him in just a second, was in the bar and broke through some of the glass to get out. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us what happened inside the bar last night?
I was on the dance floor, then we got off the dance floor, and we were on the right side of the entrance, and then he enters through. He starts shooting with his gun. I originally didn't think him. I couldn't believe it, so I was looking at him. He was wearing a trench coat. I didn't see any headgear on him. I just saw black hair, and he had a lighter skin tone. And then I was looking at his gun, and it was a pistol submachine gun with a short barrel, and it had a really big magazine, and he was just popping off shots like nothing. And once I realized that everything was, you know, going down south, and everyone was kind of ducking, and then me and Tim, my friend Tim Munson, grabbed the girls we were with, and we were dragging them off to the side behind the wall so we could get away. And then the shooting stopped for a couple seconds, and I looked up, and you know, I could have swore I saw a smoke grenade. I know the police aren't saying that right now, but I saw the smoke from the barrel of the gun, and then I saw the device on the ground, and it was leaking smoke, and it looked like a smoke grenade. So I saw that, and then I ran, I grabbed a chair, and I broke it through the glass, and I kicked the chair through, and then I heard other people running around after that, and then I broke the glass through with my hands, and then me and my friend Tim led the girls outside, and I guess some other people followed behind us. And as we were coming out, or before we came out, like sometime before that, the gunman started shooting again, and then my friend got hit in the shoulder. And then he was screaming my name, and he said, you know, Mitchell, like, I'm hit. And then I grabbed him, and then we ran behind this dumpster in this wall. And then we stayed there for like 10 minutes, and we were waiting for an ambulance or police. A couple cops came, and then the second round of shots started, and he shot at least like 20 rounds off. And it sounded to me like they were outside, but I guess they might have not been. But it sounded to me like they were close and outside. But we were in the middle of the parking lot, so I don't know. And then 10 minutes after that, more cops came. And then about 5 minutes after that, someone came and picked my friend Tim up. And then they picked the girls up. And then I went over to my friend.
Okay. Mitchell,
And, yeah.
Mitchell, can we ask you a couple of questions about what you saw? How far do you think you were from the shooter?
10 to 15 feet.
Okay, so you got a good look at him, and you describe him as wearing a black trench coat. You said it was a handgun, but describe the handgun again.
I don't know. I don't know if you know what an Uzi looks like, but it looks like an Uzi or a Mac 11. Like a submachine gun that's handheld with a short barrel and a really long magazine. And it looked to me like, it just looked like that. It could have been a pistol with a really big magazine, but I could tell it was a really small caliber. It was like a 9mm or a 22.
And when he was Mitchell, when he was shooting, did he say anything? Did he holler anything?
He probably did. I mean, I couldn't hear it because it's indoors and he's shooting a gun, and you can't hear anything. You know what I mean? But he probably was shouting stuff.
But he only had one weapon, Mitchell? He only had one weapon. Did you see him reload?
The thing is that he had one weapon when I saw him, and then everyone went behind that, or, you know, we did, us four. We went behind that wall. And then he threw the smoke. I know he threw the smoke. I know he did. And he stopped shooting for like a couple seconds, and I think he either reloaded or he switched to another gun, because I'm hearing reports that people said they heard different gunshot sounds. So he either, I don't know if he reloaded or he switched to another gun, but he stopped shooting for a few seconds, and that's when I threw the chair out the window. And then I was rushing to get that window clear, and then as we were coming out, I think he started shooting again, and my friend got hit. And
Mitchell, was that your friend Tim that got hit in the shoulder?
Yeah.
How's he doing now?
He's okay. He's in the hospital. He got really lucky. The bullet did not hit anywhere near his chest cavity or his lungs or his heart. It just went straight to the muscle of his shoulder. So a few more inches and it would have been bad.
Do you know any of the victims that died?
I have not been released the information of any of the victims that died. So I do not know yet.
Mitchell, when you try to get into this club, what security is there? What did they ask for when you walked in? You're 19 in this club. How did you get in? Did they go through a metal detector or anything like that?
No metal detector. They actually have pretty tight security for the area that we're around. They ask for your ID, the ID podium in front, so they ask for your ID first, and then you pay when you get to the front door. The problem is that he came in so late, and I mean, honestly, anywhere, if you walk in fast enough, you can get in for just a split second, and that's all you needed. If you just needed to walk in for a split second, start shooting, and then once you start shooting, everyone around him is going to duck and cover. And probably what they did. And then he shot the front desk receptionist, and he shot the security guard. And that's just what happened. And that's just the way it is. Like,
if I
there's
can,
nothing, honestly, there's really nothing the security guard could have done.
Yeah.
And Darren, I wanted to bring in, if I could, Darren Porcher to question you, Mitchell. He's an Army veteran, former NYPD officer. You're listening to this story. I'm sure you have questions.
Absolutely, Mitchell. My hat goes off to you for your act of bravery. I truly commend you. One of my first questions to you is, when the shooting began, was the music still on?
Yes, it was.
Okay, where was the shooter positioned when you first heard the first shots?
Directly walking in the front door. So if you walk in the front door, maybe a few steps ahead, probably facing straight. I'm hearing stuff that he shot the front desk clerk, which would be on his direct right, and he shot the security guard, which would be somewhere in front of him. So I don't know, but when I saw him, he was looking straight and he was walking straight, and he had the gun out in front of him.
Okay, Mitchell, is it safe? Mitchell, is it safe to say that the shooter had the door blocked as he was shooting into the crowd?
Well, I mean, yeah, because if a guy's walking in, pulling the trigger, then you're not going to walk toward the door. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
I understand.
Everyone went away from that.
Very chilling situation. Secondly, was the music on for the entirety as the shots were going out? Or did the DJ turn the music off as the shots were firing?
You know, that's the thing. I don't really know because, you know, it's a gun in an indoor area, and everyone's hearing starts to go to crap. And
Yeah,
I
Mitchell.
don't really know if the music was playing.
Mitchell,
But,
can we ask you also about the area? I mean, we're thinking it's college country night. We heard it started at 9. It runs until 2. Line dancing night. We're familiar with these colleges that are in that area: California Lutheran, Pepperdine, predominantly Christian college. Can you tell us about the friends that were there, the type of people that go to this Borderline Bar and Grill?
I don't know too many people there that go there. I know that it is college night on Wednesday night. It's not as crowded at this time of year. It's more crowded like during summer and all that.
Right.
I know that a lot of people that go there like country music because it's a borderline country bar.
Yep.
But me and my friends just go there on Wednesday nights. I don't really know what college they go to. I don't really want to bring that into it in the first place.
Right.
I'm
It's
here to tell you what happened.
Right. It is a hub for country music fans. And in fact, according to the LA Times, some survivors of the Route 91 festival in Las Vegas, where 58 were killed last year, have been in attendance on nights like this. Mitchell, before you go, how many shots do you think you heard over how long a time?
When he walked in, at least 20 to 30. 20 to 30. The second round of shots that he shot when we were outside by the garbage can, at least 15 to 20.
So over a period of what, 5 minutes?
It would be a couple minutes the first time he emptied his magazine. And then we got out maybe 10 minutes later. 10 minutes later, he emptied another magazine, I think. Yeah.
And did he seem to be aiming at anybody in particular? Was he looking for anybody in particular, or was he just trying to shoot as many people as he could?
I think he was just trying to shoot as many people as he could. You know what I mean?
So yeah,
I
to
didn't
get his
see him aiming
motivation.
at anyone. And he was rapid fire. Like, it was a semi-auto gun, but he was rapid fire. And you know, he didn't look like he was aiming at anyone. He just looked like he walked in and started shooting people. That's what I saw, and that's what I heard, because I mean, if he was aiming at someone, he would have shot them, and then it
Right.
would have been over. He would have took his own. He would have taken his own life.
Hey, Mitchell, we can't thank you enough for the time and the insight, especially with your buddy hit. You're trying to save other people and fighting for your own life, and you're able to tell the country what actually happened in Thousand Oaks.
Did you see the sheriff sergeant get hit?
No, sir. Actually, you know, I wish I knew when he went in, but I did not know about that. I just found out about that, and that's kind of disappointing to me.
Mitchell, what about Mitchell? You a college student?
Yes, ma'am.
Where do you go to school?
Moore Park.
Well, thank you so much for your hero this morning. You said you broke the window, you escorted some of the girls out, and your friend was right behind you. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story with us.
How many kids from your college were there last night, Mitchell?
No idea. Probably a lot.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Mitchell. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
So this thing will fold at 11:20 local time out on the West Coast in Thousand Oaks, which is in proximity of many locations. If you're in Pepperdine, you just you cut through the mountains and you're right there in 25 minutes. If you're in the Thousand Oaks area, you get on the 101 and you're right there in a very short time. On a Wednesday night, I imagine he said there were bigger crowds in the summer, but a pretty good crowd that night.
Well, a lot of people are just waking up here on the East Coast at 6:30 here on the East Coast. And if you're just waking up, you probably don't know this information yet. There was a mass shooting at a bar in California at 11:20 last night. The bar is called Borderline Bar and Grill. It was college country night, and it was line dancing night. There were several hundred people inside the bar, according to witnesses. And 11 victims were killed when the police walked into the bar. Then they saw the suspect, they say, was dead as well. And then a sergeant was escorted out. He was unresponsive, taken to the hospital, and he did pass away.
Sheriff Jeff Dean has already held a press conference. The 41-year vet had to discuss the death of a sergeant that was a workout buddy of his and a good friend. He also had to pick up the phone and call the family, his wife and child, and say, Ron Helis has died. So we're going to get details on that, but he was the first one in, it seems, and was on the receiving end of fire from the gunman.
That's right. They're trying to piece the picture together. There were hundreds of people in attendance. The police are trying to talk to as many people as possible. So they're getting eyewitness reports. There are a lot of stories out on the internet right now. Jonathan Hunt has been there for the last couple of hours. Jonathan, we just heard from an eyewitness by the name of Mitchell Hunter, who said that he could have sworn the guy popped off some smoke bombs as he came in, but he also described what it sounded like a handgun of some sort, but it also sounded like it was able to fire a large number of shots at a time.
Yeah, it seems like it was a semi-automatic handgun, and that is the only weapon that the Sheriff Dean has been talking about so far. I want to bring in now, though, Steve, another eyewitness. This is John Hedge. He was right in the entranceway when the shooting started. And John, tell me just what you saw, what happened.
Sorry, I'm losing my voice. So, I mean, I was sitting at the tables nearest to the front door, and I hear some guns, or I hear some loud pop, 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 and I didn't know what it was. I thought it was a joke. All of a sudden, I see my stepdad dive to the ground, and he says, hide, hit the deck, what are you doing? Get to the ground, sort of thing, yelling, and so I dive, and I look up, and there's a gunman taking fire. The bouncer was already down at that point. He was pointing it behind the front desk, the cash register. And
you got a good look at the shooter. Tell me what you saw, what he looked like.
Yeah, he had a full beard. He was wearing a black hat, a black jacket on. He had darker skin. He couldn't have been over 30.
Did he say anything?
He didn't say anything. The only thing you hear is screaming and people, just yelling.
And you told me earlier he, for sure, from what you saw, was using smoke grenades?
Yeah, I left when I got out of the front door. I went back to see if my stepdad was okay or where he was, or if there was anybody trying to get out. and I saw some smoke grenades being thrown and more gunshots. He was behind the desk, around the desk at that point, and that's, when I heard my stepdad yelling, I'm over here, like, we need to get out of here, and there's people running all over the place.
And how did you get out?
Well, when I got up, I was gonna go run to the bathroom to go hide, and I saw that he had left the front door area, and there was maybe one or couple people that ran out. So I just ran as fast as I could to the front door, and thank God I made it out okay. He was right there. I mean, me and my stepdad were the closest people besides the bouncer and the people at the front desk to the front door.
And did you see the sheriff's deputy who was shot?
No, I didn't. But
he was one of the first law enforcement officer through the door. Was shot too and died in the hospital a short time ago.
So when we were leaving in our car, that's when the sheriff said we're arriving. So I mean, they're the real heroes. If they're not there, God, who knows what happens.
And your stepdad is okay too.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, John, well, thank you for talking to us. We're glad you got out okay. Thank you very much. Horrifying witness accounts that we're hearing again and again this morning, and very emotional accounts, obviously. We heard just now from the sheriff who was paying tribute to that Sheriff Sergeant Ron Heelis, a 29-year veteran of the Sheriff's Department here in Ventura County. He used to work out with Sheriff Dean, and Sheriff Dean was very emotional when talking about him. Listen here to the sheriff.
Is it 13? Okay,
I think we were waiting for a soundbite. Jonathan, a question for you. With your eyewitness right there, regarding the smoke bombs, when we heard from Sheriff Dean a little while ago, he did not know, he could not confirm whether or not any smoke bombs were used, because there's some stories that the guy walked in and threw some smoke bombs and started shooting people. But your eyewitness, once again, went back to the smoke bombs, as did our eyewitness. What do you think happened?
Yeah. Well, it certainly seems from what we are hearing from these eyewitnesses that some sort of smoke devices were going off. At the time, we'll obviously have to wait for the full investigation and for sheriff's deputies to confirm the sequence of events here, but something was happening, according to John Hedge, we just spoke to there, according to other eyewitnesses. And John, remember, was standing right at the front where the shooter came in, and he said without doubt the shooter was throwing what John described as smoke grenades. And as the sheriff himself said in that news conference a short time ago that you took live, Steve, if there were indeed smoke grenades being used, then that speaks to a greater degree of planning. Walking in with a handgun and firing at these young people who were enjoying a night out at the Borderline Bar and Grill is one thing. If you're going in armed with that handgun, possibly other weapons, we don't know yet, plus smoke grenades, then obviously you have given a lot of thought to precisely what you are about to do. But this will all be part of the investigation. We're hearing various descriptions of the shooter himself. We heard from John. He thought he's around 30 years old, dressed pretty much completely in black, wearing eyeglasses, said he had a full beard. But we don't know the identity of the shooter yet. He is dead inside the Borderline Bar and Grill, so you can be very confident that sheriff's deputies will have an identity very shortly, if they do not already, and have just not chosen to share it with us yet. But we will know a lot more about the shooter in the coming hours, so there is no point speculating on who he might be, where he might have come from, what his motives might have been at the moment. We'll get all that information in due course. And one other thing, one other note of caution on these eyewitnesses: obviously everybody who was in there comes out traumatized. They come out having gone through a terrifying scene where they have been gripped by terror, flushed with adrenaline. So some of the things you hear as they come out do not prove, as history tells us in these incidents, to be entirely accurate. That's why we want to give the eyewitnesses themselves the chance to say what they say. We're only reporting what we know for sure, and what we know for sure is that there was this terrible incident 11 11:20 p.m. local time last night. The first 911 calls came in. Within 3 minutes, a sheriff's deputy and members of the California Highway Patrol were here. Then that sheriff's sergeant, Ron Heelis, was the first to enter the bar at around 11:26, 6 minutes after the first 911 calls. He took the decision to go in because he heard shooting still going on. As he opened that door, according to Sheriff Dean, he was met in a hail of bullets that ultimately took his life. Those are the tragic facts. Sheriff Heelis and 11 other, largely young people, have lost their lives.
Jonathan, we'll just try to find out, if you could, if the security guard was armed, if he even had a shot of stopping this gunman, because that's key. If you're just a big guy and the other guy has a gun, you don't have a shot. But if you could find that out, that would be great. Jonathan Hunt, we'll check in with you again shortly. With us right now is Darren Porcher, former NYPD officer, Army veteran. You've been listening to this. You've been hearing about from 2 eyewitnesses, following this all morning. Was this preventable?
It's really difficult to say. I mean, we're at a deciduous stage with this. One of the things that I revert back to from a law enforcement perspective is we go back to 2012, the James Egan home shooting that happened in Aurora, Colorado. Is very similar in that we have the smoke cartridges that was sent out. So this is clearly a premeditated attack. And then we move forward 4 years later to 2016 when we had the Pulse nightclub shooting, where we had the individual, Mr. Mateen, that came into the club and he shot up the place. And then when we moved to 2017, where we had the Las Vegas massacre, and I see what the connections or the nexus here was the affiliation with the country music. The truth of the matter is this: it's a horrific incident, and then we go back to the seismic shift in policing, where we now have police officers that go directly in to interdict the threat, as opposed to waiting outside, as we saw what happened with the Nicholas Cruz shooting in Parkland. We had a hero that lost his life, and it's really unfortunate, but we're still at the deciduous stage of extracting information and intelligence to determine what happened. Why did this person go here? He was armed with a handgun. I also hear that there was possibly a semi-automatic weapon in addition to that. But what really jumps off the page to me is he was in a club with a trench coat. Me, as a police officer, or even a security guard for that matter, this should have been something that should have been blaring. A person coming in a trench coat, that's something that really sends shockwaves.
Well, he might have just started firing off shots when he walked in the front door, because we've heard one witness said he was on the dance floor and he looked over at the front door, and the cashier that's always there, because he goes every single week and has been going there for months, he saw her get shot. And then he saw the security guard at the front get shot. So the security guard might have been coming toward him and saying, "Hold on, sir," and then was shot himself. We just don't know at this point. You know what I'm thinking, though? When you're a parent, I remember when my parents, when they dropped us off at college, and the tears are flowing. It's your child. You know, you've spent 18 years raising them.
Absolutely.
This was college night, and 11 children, 11 young adults were killed there. We don't know their ages, we don't know the details, but it was college night. And I assume that most of them were young, if not all of them. What's happening now? The parents are getting phone calls. As we're reporting this news live, parents, they're trying to track down families. The police officers are calling them, and their hearts are breaking this morning. When do we find out information about those individuals, and what's happening now as far as finding out who this suspect is?
Well, the police department, the Ventura County Police Department, their public information officer is getting that information out to the families first. After that information gets out to the families, then we'll be abreast to it as the public. I mean, what was interesting to me and somewhat a shock, they introduced the name of the sergeant that was shot. That very rarely happens.
He's the sheriff, though. He makes that call, right?
Right, exactly. But that's normally not the course of action.
Why wouldn't that be the course of action? Because the family's already been notified.
See, well, I don't know. From my understanding,
he did say he had spoken to his wife.
Okay.
The sergeant's wife.
Because initially, this takes a while before that information gets out.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is, this is a situation that, and just to double back on what we mentioned earlier, traditionally when you enter a nightclub, there's an alcove and there's usually 2 doors. And one of the things that happens is there's a search when you walk in. As one of the witnesses stated, this was the area where the search was taking place. Usually one of the first things that happens is that second door is closed.
Right.
You don't have
For
the
that
ability,
reason.
right, exactly. You don't have the ability to advance directly into the venue as a result of that. So this is something that we have to look back at.
It sounds as if the shooter came in, shot both those people, and then went in.
In addition to that, normally nightclubs don't have active shooter protocols the way schools do. So that's why you have this pandemonium in connection with this.
Thanks, Dr. Porcher. Great. All right,
thank you.
We'll check in with you again.
All right. If you're just joining us, more out of California in a moment. At least 13 dead in a country music bar overnight. It was college night. We'll have the latest from California coming up.
My mom.
All right, we are back with a Fox News alert, and I wish we weren't telling this horrific news. At least 12 people are dead, including a sheriff sergeant, after a gunman opened fire at a bar in California. It was packed, reportedly, with college students. The gunman also dead.
At least 10 other people are hurt, and SWAT teams and bomb squads, they rushed to the scene overnight. It's located about 40 miles northwest of Los Angeles.
Mario Ramirez from KTTV television in Los Angeles joins us with breaking details. And Mario, I understand you just talked to another eyewitness. What did they tell you?
Yeah, good morning. We actually spoke to someone who was at the Vegas shooting a little over a year ago. Very emotional, as you can imagine. He says he was in the middle of the dance floor. He heard those gunshots ring out. People darted. They scattered, some hiding in the bathroom, some hiding in the attic. So a very chaotic scene. And we're actually learning about some more of the injured here on the scene. And some of them we're learning from Captain Ziegler here with the Ventura County Fire Department drove themselves to the hospital.
That's correct. So some of the additional information on patients or victims is we did learn very early on that some of those that were able to get out of the facility actually drove themselves to the hospital. We're still trying to finalize that number and make sure that we've accounted for everybody. Our latest numbers are 18 injured individuals, unknown on the extent of the injuries. They have transported themselves to local hospitals, and then 2 have been transported by ambulance to local hospitals as well.
And so we're hearing some of those injuries, maybe, some of the patrons breaking through windows, stuff like that, trying to escape.
Yes, we did receive reports of other patrons assisting other patrons out by breaking windows and helping people, pulling people through windows. So very heroic actions taken by patrons in the face of a very horrific situation here. So our latest numbers on those, again, 18 individuals who have transported themselves to local hospitals and 2 transported by ambulance.
Just a massive response here. Can you walk us through how you set up something like this? I know earlier there was a triage situation. People were receiving treatment, different tents here set up on the scene. What's the latest on that, and how do you go into something like this?
Yes. So currently this is a law enforcement investigation. All the patients that we are aware of have been transported and initially assessed on scene and transported to hospitals and or self-transported. So it is a law enforcement situation currently. Our role here is to assist the law enforcement agency, our brothers and sisters in the law enforcement agencies, with providing you as the most up-to-date information. And as you can imagine, hundreds of first responders responded initially to the scene. That includes local law enforcement agencies, fire agencies, as well as agencies from Los Angeles County and Los Angeles City.
Thank you, Captain Ziegler. We've also seen a lot of emotions running high, lots of students out here praying, gathering, really trying to comfort each other. That's the latest here at Thousand Oaks. We'll send it back to you in the studio.
All right, Mario, thank you very much. All right.
Heard so many different stories. One guy said they were piled up on top of each other trying to get out of the back door, and they hit the ground because the shooter started firing, and then someone came running up behind him and said, "Get up, get out the door. He is coming. He's coming this way."
That's
How
right.
Terrifying.
One of the sheriff's deputies said it is a horrific scene inside the Borderline Bar and Grill. There is blood everywhere. We're continuing to follow the story. We're going to take a quick time out. We'll be right back.